I thought I knew what humiliation felt like until my own wife called me useless in front of her boardroom full of millionaires. There I was, Marcus Cole, just the maintenance guy trying to fix a flickering light, while she treated me like I was nothing more than broken furniture that couldn't do its job. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been carrying a secret in my back pocket that would turn her entire world upside down. You see, that useless maintenance worker she just humiliated in front of her precious board members, I secretly own the company that just bought her business. And now I have 30 days to decide if the woman I married is worth saving, or if it's time to show her exactly what happens when you forget who you're really dealing with. If you're watching this story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this revenge is just getting started. The fluorescent light above the boardroom table flickered like a dying star. Marcus Cole pushed his maintenance cart through the mahogany doors, tools clinking softly in the quiet morning air. The executive floor of Whitaker Industries always felt different from the rest of the building. Thicker carpet, newer paint, and an invisible weight that pressed down on anyone who didn't belong. Marcus belonged here more than anyone knew. He wore his Navy maintenance polo with the company logo, work boots that had seen better days, and the kind of calm expression that came from years of being invisible to people who mattered. At 30, Marcus had learned to move through spaces like water, present but unnoticed, effective but unremarkable. The flickering light cast strange shadows across the polished conference table. Marcus set up his stepladder and pulled out his screwdriver, glancing at his watch. 7:45. The board meeting started at 8, which gave him exactly 15 minutes to fix the problem and disappear. The elevator chimed down the hall. Marcus kept working, listening to the familiar sounds of morning power rituals. Expensive heels clicked against marble, briefcases snapped open, coffee cups clinked against saucers. The company's leadership filed past the boardroom like actors taking their places for opening night. Marcus. He turned to find Tyler Grady in the doorway, perfectly pressed suit and that smile that never reached his eyes. The chief operating officer had a way of saying Marcus's name that made it sound like a question he didn't really want answered. "Morning, Mr. Grady," Marcus said, not coming down from the ladder. "Almost done? Big presentation today." Tyler's tone carried just enough edge to remind Marcus of his place in the food chain. "Just need another minute or two." Tyler nodded and moved on, but Marcus caught the way his eyes lingered on the maintenance cart, like he was cataloging everything that didn't belong in this pristine space. The light flickered again, more urgently, this time. Marcus twisted the bulb housing and felt it catch properly. The harsh, fluorescent glow steadied, casting the boardroom in its usual sterile brightness. He climbed down and folded the ladder, muscle memory guiding his movements while his mind drifted to other things, like the envelope in his back pocket, like the secret that had been eating at him for 6 months, like his wife, who would walk through those doors any minute and look right through him. The elevator chimed again, closer this time. Marcus heard her voice before he saw her, that crisp, professional tone that could cut glass when she wanted it to. Need the quarterly projections ready by 9:30 and make sure legal has reviewed the Henderson contract before. Sloane Whitaker stepped into the boardroom like she owned the world, which, in most ways that mattered, she did. At 31, she commanded attention without trying. Auburn hair pulled back in a perfect bun, charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's rent, and green eyes that could freeze someone in place or melt them completely. Marcus had seen both expressions, though lately he mostly got the freezing kind. She glanced at him briefly, the way someone might notice a piece of furniture, and continued her conversation with her assistant. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitaker," Marcus said quietly. She looked up, surprised. "Oh, Marcus, I thought you'd be finished by now." Not "good morning" back, not even a smile, just the faint irritation of someone whose schedule had been interrupted. Almost done, he said, packing his tools. The light should hold steady now. Good. We can't have it flickering during the presentation. Marcus nodded and wheeled his cart toward the door, but movement in the hallway made him pause. Board members streamed past, older white men in expensive suits, a few women in equally expensive outfits, all carrying themselves with the casual confidence that came with money and power. Diane Whittaker brought up the rear. Sloane's mother moved like royalty, silver hair perfectly styled, designer handbag clutched in manicured fingers. At 58, she had perfected the art of looking down on people while appearing perfectly pleasant. Her eyes found Marcus immediately. "Sloane, dear, are we ready to begin?" Just waiting for Marcus to finish. Diane's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Perhaps the help could work around the meeting schedule in the future. The help. Marcus felt the familiar burn in his chest. Not anger, exactly, but something deeper. Something that had been building for months as he watched the woman he married turn into someone he barely recognized. "It's fine, Mother," Sloane said, settling into her seat at the head of the table. "Marcus, if you could just—" The light flickered. Every head in the room turned upward as the fluorescent tube stuttered like a dying heartbeat. Marcus stopped mid-step, tools already packed away, ladder folded and secured. "Seriously?" Tyler's voice carried across the room. "We're about to present to investors and the lights are having a seizure?" A few board members chuckled. Diane's eyes never left Marcus. "I can take another look," Marcus said, already moving back toward his cart. "No time," Sloane said, checking her tablet. "Can't you just, I don't know, tighten it or something?" Marcus unfolded the ladder again, climbed up, and examined the fixture. The connection looked solid. Sometimes these old fluorescents just needed— The light flickered again, casting wild shadows across the conference table. "This is unacceptable," one of the board members muttered. Marcus twisted the housing, jiggled the bulb, checked every connection he could see. The problem wasn't mechanical, it was electrical, probably in the wall. A 10-minute fix with the power off, but that would mean delaying the meeting. He climbed down and faced the room full of powerful people staring at him like he'd personally insulted their mothers. "I'll need to check the wall switch," he said. "Might take—" "Just leave it," Sloane snapped. "We'll manage." Marcus blinked. "Ma'am?" "I said leave it. We have a presentation to give." The room went quiet. Even Tyler looked surprised by the sharpness in Sloane's voice. Marcus nodded slowly and reached for the coffee service cart beside the wall, intending to move it away from the light switch. His elbow caught the edge of a ceramic mug, and coffee splashed across the polished table, spreading like spilled ink across important documents. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, Sloane shot to her feet, her face flushed with embarrassment and fury. "Are you kidding me right now? Are you actually kidding me?" Marcus grabbed napkins from the cart, working quickly to contain the spill. "I'm sorry. I'll clean this up." "Useless," Sloane said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Absolutely useless." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, looked genuinely troubled, but a few others smiled like they'd just witnessed something amusing. Diane Whittaker's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Marcus caught the slight nod of approval she gave her daughter. Marcus finished cleaning the spill in silence, his movements careful and deliberate. The room watched him work, some with embarrassment, others with the detached interest of people observing a minor inconvenience. When the table was clean, Marcus straightened and looked directly at his wife. "Anything else, Mrs. Whittaker?" Something in his tone made her pause. For just a moment, her professional mask slipped, and he saw a flicker of the woman he'd married 3 years ago. The woman who used to laugh at his jokes and fall asleep on his shoulder during late-night movies. Then, the mask snapped back into place. That's all? She said coolly. Marcus nodded, packed his supplies, and wheeled his cart toward the door. In the hallway, he could hear the meeting resuming, voices discussing quarterly projections and market expansion and all the important things that happened in rooms where people like him weren't welcome. He made it to the maintenance closet before his hands started shaking. Marcus set down his cleaning cloth and pulled the envelope from his back pocket. Official letterhead, corporate seal, the kind of document that changed everything. He'd carried it for 3 days, waiting for the right moment to show Sloane, waiting for some sign that she still saw him as her husband instead of just another employee to manage. Instead, he'd gotten useless. Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it back in his pocket. Then he walked to the small bathroom off the maintenance area and stared at himself in the mirror. 30 years old, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders from years of physical work, dark skin that showed every emotion in his eyes whether he wanted it to or not. His father had always said that a man's worth wasn't measured by what he owned, but by how he treated people who couldn't do anything for him. Marcus had spent 3 years watching the woman he loved fail that test over and over again. He splashed cold water on his face and made a decision. When he walked back to the executive floor, the boardroom was still humming with conversation. Marcus knocked on the doorframe and waited. "What is it?" Sloane asked, without looking up from her presentation materials. "Mrs. Whitaker, I need to speak with you for a moment, privately." She glanced at the clock. "We're in the middle of... It's important." Something in his voice made her look at him, really look at him, for the first time all morning. She excused herself and followed him into the hallway, closing the boardroom door behind her. "Marcus, whatever it is, can it wait? We have investors." "No," he said quietly. "It can't wait." He pulled out the envelope and handed it to her. Sloane frowned, turning it over in her hands like it might bite her. "What's this?" "Open it." She broke the seal and unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the corporate letterhead and official language. Marcus watched her face change as the words sank in. Confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. "This says..." She looked up at him, then back at the letter. "This says Whitaker Industries was acquired last week by Sterling Holdings Group." "That's right." "But that's impossible. I would have known. I'm the CEO. Nobody can just..." She stopped, reading more carefully. "Majority stake purchase, board approval, effective immediately." Her voice trailed off. "Keep reading," Marcus said. Sloane's eyes found the signature line at the bottom of the letter. Owner and principal, Marcus Cole. The letter slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. "That's not possible," she whispered. Your maintenance. You fix lights. You don't own companies." Marcus bent down and picked up the letter, folding it carefully before putting it back in his pocket. "I've owned Sterling Holdings for 6 years," he said. "Started with the insurance money from my dad's accident and some smart investments. Nothing fancy, just patient saving and knowing which small companies were worth buying. Last week, when Whitaker Industries needed quick capital for the Henderson expansion, Sterling Holdings was there to help." Sloane stared at him like he'd started speaking a foreign language. "You've been lying to me for 6 years." "I've been working maintenance for 6 years," Marcus corrected. "The company ownership was separate. I kept it quiet because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I couldn't do anything for you." "And what did you see?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking about coffee spilled on important documents and the word useless spoken in front of people who mattered. Thinking about 3 years of marriage where he'd slowly become invisible. "I saw someone who forgot that respect isn't something you earn with a title," he said finally. "I saw someone who treats people like furniture when she thinks nobody's watching. And I saw my wife call me useless in front of a room full of people who already think I don't belong here." Sloane's face went pale. Marcus, I didn't mean the presentation, the pressure. Your mother wasn't the one who said it. The words hung between them like a challenge. Down the hall, elevator doors chimed, and Marcus heard footsteps approaching. Priya Shah, the HR director, rounded the corner carrying a stack of files. She slowed when she saw them standing close together in intense conversation. Everything okay? Priya asked carefully. Marcus looked at Priya, really looked at her. 30 years old, smart eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of person who noticed things other people missed, like how the maintenance staff got treated, like who said what to whom in boardrooms when they thought nobody important was listening. Everything's fine, he said, just discussing some operational changes. Priya's gaze shifted between Marcus and Sloane, who still looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Okay, well, if you need anything. Actually, Marcus said, making another decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. Could you witness something for me? Witness what? Marcus pulled the acquisition letter back out of his pocket and handed it to Priya. She read it quickly, her eyebrows rising higher with each line. Holy... She caught herself and looked up at Marcus with new eyes. You own the company that just bought us? I own the company that just bought them, Marcus confirmed. And I want someone in HR to know that, starting today, how this company treats its employees, all of its employees, is going to change. Priya nodded slowly, handed the letter back, and looked at Sloane with something that might have been sympathy. Noted, she said. Anything else? Not right now. Priya walked away, but Marcus caught the small smile on her face as she disappeared around the corner. Sloane waited until they were alone again before speaking. What do you want? She asked quietly. I want my wife back, Marcus said. The woman I married who cared more about being kind than looking important. But I don't know if she exists anymore. She does. Marcus, I'm still... Are you? Because the woman I married wouldn't have called her husband useless in front of strangers. The woman I married wouldn't have let her mother call me the help without saying something. Sloane's eyes filled with tears, but Marcus felt no satisfaction in seeing them. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about figuring out if they still had something worth saving. I want 30 days, he said. 30 days for what? To figure out if we can fix this. Separate bedrooms, weekly dinners to talk, really talk, and no more pretending I'm just the maintenance guy when it's convenient. And if we can't fix it? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about divorce papers and custody arrangements and all the ways a marriage could end when two people stopped seeing each other clearly. Then, at least we'll know we tried, he said. Sloane wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her perfect makeup. The board meeting will survive without me cleaning up any more spills, Marcus finished. Go do your presentation. Be the CEO your company needs. Just remember that the maintenance guy you've been ignoring for 3 years now owns the building. He turned to walk away, then paused. And Sloane, next time you want to call someone useless, make sure you know who you're talking to first. Marcus left her standing in the hallway and walked back to his maintenance closet. He had work to do, not fixing lights or cleaning spills, but figuring out how to rebuild a marriage that had been broken so gradually that neither of them had noticed it happening. Through the thin walls, he could hear the board meeting resuming, important voices discussing important things in their important room. Marcus smiled grimly and pulled out his phone to call his lawyer. It was time for some operational changes. Marcus spent the rest of Tuesday morning doing what he'd always done, fixing broken things. A flickering hallway light on the 3rd floor, a squeaky door hinge in legal, a clogged drain in the executive bathroom that nobody wanted to talk about, but everybody expected him to handle. The difference was that now he owned the building where all these broken things lived. He was replacing outlet covers in the lobby when Eddie Alvarez found him. You look like a man with something heavy on his mind, Eddie said, settling his broad frame against the wall. At 45, the building superintendent had the kind of weathered face that came from 30 years of fixing other people's problems. He also had the rare gift of knowing when to talk and when to just stand nearby while someone figured things out. Heavy doesn't begin to cover it, Marcus said, not looking up from his screwdriver. Want to talk about it? Marcus finished tightening the outlet cover and sat back on his heels. The lobby buzzed with lunch hour traffic, executives hurrying to power meetings, assistants juggling coffee orders and dry cleaning, the constant hum of important people doing important things. Remember what you told me when I first started here? Marcus asked. Eddie smiled. I told you a lot of things, most of them involving not letting the rich folks walk all over you. You said the measure of a man isn't what he owns, but how he treats people who can't do anything for him. Still believe that. Marcus stood and dusted off his work pants. I've been testing that theory for 3 years. The results are not encouraging. Before Eddie could respond, the elevator chimed and Sloane stepped out, looking like she'd spent her lunch hour in crisis management mode. Her perfect bun had loosened, her makeup showed stress cracks around her eyes, and she carried herself with the brittle composure of someone holding herself together through sheer willpower. She saw Marcus immediately, but walked past without speaking, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Eddie watched her go, then looked back at Marcus with raised eyebrows. That heavy thing you're carrying, he said slowly. It wouldn't happen to involve your wife treating you like hired help in front of a room full of people who think they're better than you, would it? Marcus stared at his friend. How did you... Priya Shah stopped by my office an hour ago, said there were some interesting developments in executive leadership that I should probably know about. Eddie's expression grew serious. She also said someone I care about might need a friend today. The lobby suddenly felt too small, too public, too full of people who might overhear conversations that could change everything. Marcus gathered his tools and nodded toward the building's side exit. Buy you a coffee? 20 minutes later, they sat in a diner 3 blocks away from Whitaker Industries, two working men in a place that specialized in honest food served without pretense. Marcus stared at his untouched sandwich while Eddie waited patiently for him to find the words. I bought the company, Marcus said finally. Eddie blinked once, slowly. Come again? Sterling Holdings Group. That's my company. I've owned it for 6 years, and last week, I used it to acquire majority ownership of Whitaker Industries. Marcus looked up from his sandwich. I own the place where my wife humiliated me this morning. Eddie was quiet for a long moment, processing. Well, he said eventually, that's either the best revenge story I've ever heard or the saddest love story. Haven't decided which yet. It's not revenge, Marcus said quickly. I never meant for it to go this way. The acquisition was business. Whitaker needed capital fast. Sterling had it available. I thought maybe I'd tell her after the deal closed, surprise her with how well I'd done. But then this morning happened and you realized your wife doesn't know who she married. I realized my wife became someone I don't recognize. Eddie took a bite of his burger and chewed thoughtfully. So, what's your play? Fire her? Shut down the company? Make her clean toilets while you sit in the CEO chair? Marcus shook his head. Separate bedrooms for 30 days, weekly dinners to see if we can figure out where we went wrong, and boundaries. No more calling me useless, no more letting her mother treat me like the help, no more pretending I don't exist when it's convenient. And if it doesn't work? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about divorce lawyers and custody battles and explaining to future girlfriends why his marriage ended over spilled coffee and a flickering light. Then At least I'll know I tried to save something worth saving instead of just burning it down. Eddie nodded slowly. That's either very wise or very stupid. Haven't decided which yet. Thanks for the support. I'm serious, Marcus. You've got power now. Real power. The kind that can destroy people who've been stepping on you for years. The fact that you're choosing to use it to try saving your marriage instead of getting even, that says something about the kind of man you are. What kind of man am I? The kind who still believes people can change. Question is whether you're right. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. Sloan, we need to talk. Tonight, please. He showed the message to Eddie, who whistled low. She's scared, Eddie said. Good, she should be. Scared people do desperate things. Might want to watch your back for a while. Marcus pocketed his phone and finally took a bite of his sandwich. It tasted like cardboard, but his body needed fuel for whatever came next. Eddie, can I ask you something? Shoot. When your marriage ended, how did you know it was really over? Eddie's expression grew distant. When I realized I was staying for the version of her that used to exist instead of dealing with the version that actually did exist. Love ain't enough if it's love for a ghost. They finished their meal in comfortable silence. Two men who'd learned that some truths were too big for words. When they got back to Whitaker Industries, Tyler Grady was waiting in the lobby. Marcus, Tyler said, that politician's smile locked in place. Heard you had quite the morning. Rough start with the presentation equipment. Got sorted out, Marcus said carefully. Good, good. You know, I've been thinking maybe we should discuss your maintenance schedule. Make sure you're not working in sensitive areas during important meetings. Wouldn't want any more accidents? The threat was subtle but clear. Know your place, or we'll put you in it. Marcus looked at Tyler. Really looked at him. Perfectly pressed suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Cufflinks that caught the lobby light just right. Hair styled with the kind of precision that required standing appointments at expensive salons. All of it funded by a company that Marcus now owned. I appreciate the feedback, Marcus said evenly. I'll take it under consideration. Tyler's smile flickered slightly. Something in Marcus's tone didn't match the subservient response he'd expected. Good. Well, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Tyler walked away, but not before Marcus caught the way he glanced back over his shoulder, like he was trying to figure out why the conversation hadn't gone the way he'd planned. That one's going to be a problem, Eddie said quietly. Yeah, but not today. Marcus spent the rest of his shift doing routine maintenance tasks while his mind worked through larger problems. How do you rebuild trust with someone who stopped seeing you as an equal? How do you love someone who's become comfortable with cruelty? How do you save a marriage when part of you isn't sure it deserves saving? At 5:30, he cleaned his tools, locked his maintenance cart, and headed home to face whatever version of his wife was waiting for him. The penthouse apartment they shared was everything Sloan had wanted when they first got married. Floor-to-ceiling windows with city views, marble countertops that reflected light like water, furniture that looked like it belonged in magazines. Marcus had never felt comfortable there, but he'd learned to navigate its expensive emptiness. He found Sloan in the living room, still in her work clothes but with her shoes kicked off and her hair down around her shoulders. She'd been crying. He could tell from the slight puffiness around her eyes and the way she held herself too carefully, like someone afraid of falling apart. Hi, she said quietly. Hi? Marcus set down his work bag and waited. He'd learned over 3 years of marriage that Sloan needed time to organize her thoughts before difficult conversations. Pushing her to talk faster usually made everything worse. I called my lawyer, she said finally. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Okay. Not for that, she added quickly, reading his expression. For the acquisition. I needed to understand how this could happen without me knowing. And what did he tell you? Sloane looked down at her hands. That it was completely legal. Sterling Holdings made a fair offer for majority stake. The board approved it unanimously, and all the paperwork was filed correctly. No laws broken, no irregularities, no grounds for challenge. So, you tried to find a way to undo it. I tried to find a way to understand how my husband could lie to me for 6 years about owning a multi-million-dollar company. The words hung between them like an accusation and a plea rolled into one. Marcus sat down in the chair across from her, not on the couch where they used to curl up together, but far enough away that they had to look at each other directly. I didn't lie, he said. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing, is it? Because you didn't tell me you'd started thinking of me as just another employee. You didn't tell me you'd decided I was embarrassing to be seen with. You didn't tell me you'd stopped seeing me as your husband and started seeing me as a problem to manage. Sloane's face crumpled slightly. That's not. I never. This morning you called me useless in front of your board. Not frustrated, not overwhelmed, useless, like I was a broken tool that couldn't do its job. I was stressed. The presentation, my mother was there, Tyler was making comments about the light. So you took it out on me, the person who's supposed to be your partner, the person who's supposed to be safe with you. Sloane was quiet for a long moment, tears sliding down her cheeks. When did I become that person? She whispered. When did I become someone who hurts you to make herself feel better? It was the first real question she'd asked, not about the company, not about the money, but about the space between them that had grown so wide they'd stopped seeing each other clearly. I don't know, Marcus said honestly. It happened so slowly I didn't notice until it was already too late to stop it. Can we fix it? I don't know that either, but I want to try. Sloane nodded and wiped her eyes. The separate bedrooms thing, is that punishment? No, it's space. We've been living like roommates who happen to be married. Maybe if we're honest about that, we can figure out how to be something else. And the weekly dinners? Remember when we first started dating? We'd go to that little diner on 5th Street and talk for hours about everything and nothing. No phones, no work talk, just us. Sloane smiled for the first time that day, small and sad but real. You always ordered the same thing, club sandwich and black coffee. You always stole my fries. They were better than mine. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, remembering what it felt like to enjoy each other's company. Marcus, Sloane said eventually, this morning, when I said what I said, I need you to know that I don't think you're useless. I think I've just forgotten how to see you clearly. Why? The question was simple, but Marcus could see it hit Sloane like a physical blow. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Because seeing you clearly meant admitting that I'd become someone I don't like, she said finally, and it was easier to make you smaller than to make myself better. It was the most honest thing she'd said to him in months. Thank you, Marcus said. For saying that? What happens now? Marcus stood up and picked up his work bag. Now, I sleep on the couch and you figure out if you want to be married to someone who owns the company or someone who fixes the lights, because I'm both and I'm not changing either part of who I am to make you more comfortable. And if I can't figure it out, Marcus paused at the bedroom door, then we'll both know where we stand. He left her sitting in the living room with the city lights reflecting off windows that cost more than most people's cars, looking small and lost in a space designed to make people feel important. In the bedroom, Marcus packed a few days' worth of clothes and toiletries. When he came back out, Sloane was still on the couch, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Marcus? Yeah? I'm sorry. For this morning, for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it. I hear it, Marcus said, but sorry is just words until it turns into something different. He settled onto the couch with a pillow and blanket, listening to Sloane move around the apartment, running water, closing doors, the soft sounds of someone preparing to spend the night alone. Outside, the city hummed with late evening energy. Somewhere in that maze of lights and noise were millions of people figuring out how to love each other, how to hurt each other, how to forgive each other for being imperfect humans in an imperfect world. Marcus closed his eyes and tried not to think about how many of those people were sleeping in the same bed as someone they'd forgotten how to see clearly. Tomorrow, he decided, he would start fixing more than just broken lights. Marcus woke up Wednesday morning with a crick in his neck and the sound of Sloane moving quietly through the kitchen. He lay still on the couch, listening to the familiar rhythm of her morning routine, coffee brewing, cabinet doors opening and closing, the soft clink of ceramic against granite. When he finally sat up, he found a plate of scrambled eggs waiting on the counter, still warm with a folded piece of paper beside it. Eat. We talk tonight. So simple words, but they carried weight. No signature flourish, no corporate language, just a request from his wife to her husband. Marcus ate the eggs. They were good, seasoned the way he liked them, and tried not to read too much hope into the gesture. At Whitaker Industries, he slipped into his maintenance routine like putting on familiar clothes. Check the overnight repair requests, test the elevator systems, replace burned out bulbs in the stairwells, work that kept his hands busy while his mind processed bigger problems. He was fixing a loose handrail on the second floor when Priya Shah found him. Got a minute? She asked, glancing around to make sure they were alone. Marcus tightened the last screw and stood up. What's on your mind? Coffee spills and acquisition letters mostly. Priya's expression was carefully neutral, but Marcus caught the hint of a smile at the corners of her mouth. Also, I've been getting some interesting phone calls this morning. What kind of calls? The kind where board members want to know if HR has any concerns about the new ownership structure. The kind where certain COOs want to understand what compliance issues might arise from having, how did Tyler put it, operational staff in sensitive corporate areas. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. And what did you tell them? I told them that all personnel assignments and operational procedures would continue as normal unless specifically modified by the new ownership. Priya paused, studying his face. I also told them that HR takes all workplace conduct seriously, regardless of who's involved. Meaning? Meaning that if someone wanted to file a formal complaint about unprofessional behavior in executive meetings, HR would be required to investigate and document any findings. Marcus understood immediately. Priya was offering him a weapon, official channels, formal procedures, the kind of bureaucratic leverage that could make Tyler and others think twice about how they treated people they considered beneath them. I appreciate that, Marcus said carefully, but I'm not looking to start a war. Sometimes the best way to avoid a war is to make sure everyone understands what the consequences would be. Priya adjusted her glasses, a gesture Marcus had learned meant she was about to say something important. Can I give you some advice? Please. Tyler's been making phone calls too, not to HR, but to board members, investors, people with influence. He's positioning yesterday's incident as evidence that the new ownership structure is disruptive to normal operations. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. What's his play? Best guess? He wants to create enough concern about stability and leadership that the board pressures you to sell your stake back to them, probably at a significant loss, for the good of the company. Can he do that? Not legally, but he can make your life difficult, create problems that look like they're caused by your presence, document incidents that suggest you're not suited for ownership responsibilities. Priya's expression grew serious. Be careful, Marcus. Power makes people desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. Marcus nodded, filed the warning away, and finished his repair work. But as he moved through the building that day, he started noticing things he'd missed before, conversations that stopped when he entered a room, glances that lingered a little too long, the subtle shift in atmosphere that came when people suddenly realized the maintenance guy might be listening more carefully than they'd thought. At lunch, he drove to Eddie's favorite diner. Not the one where he and Sloane used to go, but a smaller place where working people gathered to eat honest food and complain about their bosses. "You look like a man with new problems," Eddie said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Tyler's making moves." Marcus filled Eddie in on Priya's warning, watching his friend's expression grow darker with each detail. "That boy's playing with fire," Eddie said finally. "Question is, whether he's smart enough to know it." "What would you do?" Eddie was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into his coffee with the deliberate movements of someone thinking through consequences. "I'd document everything," he said finally. "Every conversation, every meeting, every time someone looks at you sideways. Build a file so thick that if Tyler tries to push, you can push back twice as hard." "That's not who I want to be." "Maybe not, but it might be who you need to be if you want to protect what matters to you." Marcus thought about Sloane making him breakfast, about 30 days of separate bedrooms and weekly dinners, about the possibility of saving something that might already be broken beyond repair. And if what matters to me is my marriage, not the company, then you better make sure your wife understands the difference between Marcus, the husband, and Marcus, the owner. Because Tyler's going to do everything he can to make sure she sees you as a threat to everything she's built. That afternoon, Marcus was replacing air filters in the executive conference room when he overheard Tyler on a phone call in the adjacent office. "Understand your concerns about operational disruptions. Nobody wants to see yesterday's incident repeated." Tyler's voice carried through the thin wall with corporate smooth confidence. "The question is whether current ownership has the judgment necessary for stable leadership." Marcus froze, listening. "Of course, we're committed to maintaining professional standards, but when personal relationships interfere with business operations..." Tyler paused, presumably listening to whoever was on the other end. "Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about." Another pause. "I think a conversation about succession planning would be prudent. Not immediately, of course, but we need to be prepared for all contingencies." Marcus finished changing the air filter as quietly as possible and left the conference room, his mind racing. Succession planning, contingencies. Tyler was already positioning himself as the solution to problems Marcus didn't even know he'd created. At 6:30 that evening, Marcus found himself sitting in the same diner where he and Sloane had shared countless conversations during their early relationship. The red vinyl booths were cracked but clean, the coffee was strong, and the waitress knew everyone's usual order. Sloane arrived exactly on time, looking smaller somehow in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual power suit. She slid into the booth across from him, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." The waitress appeared, poured coffee without being asked, and disappeared again with the efficiency of someone who understood that some conversations needed space. "Thank you for breakfast this morning," Marcus said. "Thank you for eating it." They were being so careful with each other, like people walking on ice that might crack at any moment. "How was your day?" Sloane asked. Marcus considered telling her about Tyler's phone calls, about Priya's warnings, about the subtle shift in how people looked at him now that word was spreading about the ownership change. Instead, he said, "Quiet. Yours?" "Damage control mostly. making sure clients understand that the acquisition won't affect our service quality, reassuring staff that their jobs are secure. She paused, trying to figure out how to explain to people that my husband owns the company I run. What have you been telling them? That it's complicated. Marcus smiled despite everything. That's accurate. The waitress returned with their usual orders: club sandwich and black coffee for Marcus, chicken salad and iced tea for Sloane. Neither of them had spoken their preferences aloud. Some muscle memories ran deeper than conscious thought. Can I ask you something? Sloane said, picking at her sandwich. Sure. When you decided to buy my company, what did you think would happen between us? It was a fair question, and Marcus took time to consider his answer. Honestly, I thought you'd be proud of me. I thought you'd see that the maintenance guy you married had built something significant, and maybe that would remind you that I was worth paying attention to. And instead, I called you useless in front of my board. Yeah? Sloane was quiet for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the window beside their booth. I need to tell you something, she said finally, about why I've been the way I've been. Marcus waited. My mother's been pushing me to reassess our marriage. She thinks you're holding me back professionally. She thinks I married beneath my station and that it's affecting how people see me in business circles. The words hit Marcus like physical blows, but he kept his expression neutral. And what do you think? I think I've been listening to her voice more than my own. I think I've been so worried about how our relationship looks from the outside that I forgot to pay attention to how it feels from the inside. Sloane reached across the table and touched his hand, the first voluntary physical contact they'd had since the morning everything changed. I think I've been ashamed of being ashamed of you, and that shame turned into something cruel. Marcus looked down at her hand covering his. Soft skin, perfectly manicured nails, the wedding ring he'd saved for 3 months to buy. Why are you telling me this now? Because I spent today thinking about who I want to be, and I realized that the person I've become isn't someone I recognize or respect. So, who do you want to be? I want to be someone who defends her husband when her mother calls him the help. I want to be someone who sees maintenance work as honest labor, not something to be embarrassed by. I want to be someone who remembers that love isn't about status or appearances. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. It was a good answer. Maybe too good. Marcus wanted to believe her, but 3 years of marriage had taught him to watch for the gap between Sloane's intentions and her actions. That sounds like the woman I married, he said carefully. It is. She just got lost for a while. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Marcus, Sloane said eventually, can I ask you something else? Sure. If we can't fix this, if the 30 days doesn't work, what happens to the company? It was the question Marcus had been dreading, because he didn't have a good answer. I don't know, he said honestly. I bought it as an investment, not as a way to control your life. But now that things are complicated, Tyler thinks you're going to fire me. Marcus looked up sharply. Tyler said that? Not directly, but he's been dropping hints about uncertain leadership transitions and the importance of maintaining operational stability. He's positioning himself as the safe choice if ownership decides to make changes. So, Tyler was playing both sides, undermining Marcus to the board while simultaneously preparing to benefit if the marriage fell apart completely. I'm not going to fire you, Marcus said. Whatever happens between us personally, you're good at your job. The company needs you. Relief flickered across Sloane's face, followed immediately by something that looked like guilt. You shouldn't have to promise me that. I shouldn't have given you reasons to think about it. No, you shouldn't have. The honesty was brutal but necessary. They were finally having the conversation they should have had months ago, maybe years ago, about respect and expectations and the ways that love could die slowly if nobody was paying attention. "What do you need from me?" Sloane asked. "To make this work, I mean. What do you need to see that would convince you we're worth saving?" Marcus thought about morning coffee spills and flickering lights, about the word useless, spoken in front of people who mattered, about 3 years of slowly becoming invisible in his own marriage. "I need to see you choose me," he said finally. "Not just in private when it's convenient, but in public when it costs you something. I need to see you remember that partnership means defending each other, not just tolerating each other. And if I can do that, then maybe we can figure out how to be married again instead of just living in the same apartment." Sloane nodded, tears in her eyes, but something stronger in her expression. "I want to try," she said. "I want to choose you." "Good," Marcus said, "because tomorrow's going to be the first real test." "What happens tomorrow?" Marcus thought about Tyler's phone calls, about board members asking questions, about the delicate balance between Marcus the maintenance worker and Marcus the company owner. "Tomorrow, we find out if we're a team or if we're just two people who used to be in love." They finished their dinner talking about small things, work schedules, weekend plans, whether they should order dessert, normal married couple conversations that felt revolutionary after months of careful distance. When Marcus paid the check, Sloane didn't offer to split it or make comments about his budget. When she thanked him, she meant it. When they walked to their separate cars, she touched his arm gently and said, "See you at home." Small gestures, but they carried the weight of possibility. Marcus drove back to their apartment thinking about second chances and the courage it took to choose love over pride. Behind him, Sloane followed in her own car, both of them heading toward the same uncertain future. Neither of them noticed Tyler Grady sitting in his BMW across the street from the diner, making notes on his phone about timing and body language and the kinds of details that could be useful later. Some wars, Marcus was learning, began long before anyone realized they were fighting. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that made important decisions feel heavier than they should. Marcus woke up on the couch to find another breakfast waiting. Oatmeal with brown sugar and fresh blueberries, the way his grandmother used to make it. The note beside the bowl was longer this time. "Thank you for giving us a chance. I know I haven't earned it yet, but I want to." Marcus ate slowly, tasting more than just food. He tasted effort, intention, the small acts of care that marriages were built on when both people were paying attention. At Whitaker Industries, the morning started normally enough. Marcus checked his maintenance logs, responded to overnight repair requests, and tried to ignore the way conversations stopped when he entered rooms. But by 10 o'clock, it was clear that something had shifted overnight. Priya found him first. "We need to talk," she said, her usual calm replaced by something urgent. "My office now." In HR, she closed the door and pulled out a thick folder. "Tyler submitted a formal complaint this morning," she said without preamble. "He's alleging that the current ownership structure creates conflicts of interest that compromise workplace safety and professional standards." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Based on what?" "Tuesday's incident in the boardroom. He's documented it as evidence of operational dysfunction caused by inappropriate personal relationships in professional settings." Priya opened the folder and pulled out typed pages. "He's requesting a full investigation into whether Sterling Holdings' acquisition was conducted with proper disclosure of existing employee relationships." "Can he do that?" "He can request it. Whether the board acts on it is another question." Priya's expression was grim. "But Marcus, this is serious. If they find any procedural irregularities, even minor ones, it could give them grounds to challenge the acquisition." Marcus read through Tyler's complaint, watching his marriage and his business decisions get dissected in corporate language designed to make normal human emotions sound like criminal negligence. What's my best defense? Complete transparency. Show them that Sterling Holdings acquisition was legitimate business, that your maintenance work was separate from ownership decisions, and that Tuesday's incident was an isolated interpersonal conflict, not a pattern of operational disruption. And if that's not enough, Priya was quiet for a moment, then you might have to choose between being Marcus the husband and Marcus the company owner, because Tyler's going to argue that you can't be both without compromising one or the other. Marcus left HR with his mind racing and his phone buzzing with a text from Sloan. Emergency board meeting called for 2 p.m. Tyler's making his move. I'm sorry. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Tyler wasn't just positioning himself as a solution, he was creating a crisis that only he could solve. Force Marcus to choose between his marriage and his company, then step in as the stable leadership option when everything fell apart. Marcus found Eddie in the mechanical room, checking the building's main electrical panel. You look like a man who's about to do something dangerous, Eddie said. Tyler's trying to force me out. Claims the acquisition was improper because I didn't disclose my marriage to the CEO. Eddie whistled low. Smart play. Even if it doesn't stick legally, it creates enough uncertainty to spook investors and board members. So, what's my counterplay? Depends. What matters more? Keeping the company or keeping the marriage? It was the question Marcus had been avoiding for 2 days. In the fluorescent lit mechanical room, surrounded by the building's electrical heartbeat, he finally faced the truth he'd been dancing around. The marriage, he said. If I have to choose, I choose Sloan. Then, you better make sure she chooses you back, because Tyler's betting that when push comes to shove, she'll pick the company over the husband who's threatening it. At 1:30, Marcus cleaned his tools, locked his maintenance cart, and headed to the executive floor. If Tyler wanted to force a choice, Marcus would give him one, just not the choice he was expecting. The boardroom was fuller than usual. All 12 board members plus Tyler, Sloan, Priya, and 2 people Marcus didn't recognize who looked like lawyers. Sloan sat at the head of the table, her face pale but determined. Tyler stood at the presentation screen, looking every inch the polished executive as he clicked through slides of corporate governance policies and conflict of interest regulations. Which brings us to the fundamental question, Tyler was saying as Marcus entered. Can this company maintain operational integrity when ownership and management are compromised by undisclosed personal relationships? Every head in the room turned toward Marcus. He met each gaze steadily, then took the empty chair at the far end of the table, not beside Sloan, but where everyone could see him clearly. Mr. Cole, said the board chairman, an elderly man with kind eyes who'd always nodded politely when he passed Marcus in the hallways. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Grady has raised some concerns about the acquisition process that we need to address. I understand, Marcus said calmly. I'm here to answer any questions. Tyler's presentation resumed, but Marcus barely listened. Instead, he watched Sloan, looking for signs of which version of his wife had shown up to this meeting. The CEO who would sacrifice anything to protect her position, or the woman who'd made him breakfast and promised to choose him. And the incident on Tuesday demonstrates exactly the kind of dysfunction we can expect when personal conflicts interfere with professional operations, Tyler was saying. Mrs. Whitaker was put in an impossible position, trying to maintain authority while dealing with what was essentially a domestic dispute in a business setting. Marcus saw Sloane's jaw tighten, but she didn't speak. The solution is obvious, Tyler continued. Sterling Holdings should divest its stake to qualified buyers who can maintain appropriate professional distance. I've prepared a preliminary offer that would allow Mr. Cole to recover his investment while ensuring operational stability going forward. How generous, Marcus said quietly. Tyler's smile was sharp. Business is business, Marcus. Nothing personal. Actually, Marcus said, standing up, it is personal. And I think it's time everyone understood exactly how personal. He pulled out a folder of his own, one he'd prepared during his lunch break, filled with documents that told a different story than the one Tyler was selling. 6 years ago, I started Sterling Holdings with insurance money from my father's death and every penny I could save from my maintenance salary. I built it slowly, carefully, buying small companies that were undervalued and helping them grow. Marcus walked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. Last week, when Whitaker Industries needed quick capital for the Henderson expansion, Sterling was in a position to help. The question isn't whether you had the money, one board member said. It's whether you disclosed your marriage to the CEO during negotiations. I didn't, Marcus said simply, because Sloan Whitaker, the CEO, wasn't part of the decision. The acquisition was evaluated on financial merit alone. Sterling Holdings needed a profitable Assyri company to diversify its portfolio. Whitaker Industries needed capital quickly, and the terms benefited both parties. But surely your personal relationship influenced, Tyler began. My personal relationship influenced me to stay quiet about the acquisition until it was complete, Marcus interrupted. I wanted to surprise my wife with how well I'd done. I wanted her to see that the maintenance guy she'd been taking for granted had built something significant. He looked directly at Sloan. What I didn't expect was to discover that my wife had forgotten how to treat people with basic respect. The room went dead silent. Tuesday morning wasn't about business operations, Marcus continued. It was about a marriage where one person had gotten comfortable being cruel to the other. It was about a man realizing that the woman he loved had stopped seeing him as an equal partner and started seeing him as an embarrassment to manage. Tyler started to speak, but Marcus held up a hand. Mr. Grady is right about one thing. Personal conflicts don't belong in business settings, which is why I'm here to resolve both the personal and business issues once and for all. Marcus pulled out a legal document and placed it on the table. This morning, I prepared paperwork to transfer my Sterling Holdings shares to an independent trust, with Mrs. Whitaker as the primary beneficiary. If she chooses to accept it, she'll have controlling ownership of both companies, and I'll return to being exactly what Mr. Grady thinks I should be. Just the maintenance guy. Sloane's face went white. Marcus, what are you... But, Marcus continued, the transfer only goes through if Mrs. Whitaker personally affirms, in front of this board, that she values our marriage more than any business advantage. If she can't do that, if she can't choose her husband over corporate politics, then I'll sell my stake to the highest bidder and file for divorce next week. The silence stretched until it became painful. Tyler looked like someone had yanked his script away mid-performance. The board members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly realizing they were witnessing something far more intimate than corporate governance. And Sloan stared at Marcus like he'd just offered to cut out his own heart and hand it to her. You're asking me to choose between my career and my marriage, she said quietly. I'm asking you to choose between being the kind of person who can apologize for calling her husband useless and being the kind of person who lets other people clean up her messes. Marcus's voice was steady, but everyone could hear the emotion underneath. I'm asking you to decide if love means more to you than looking powerful. Sloan looked around the table, at Tyler, whose political smile had frozen in place, at the board members who were trying to pretend they weren't witnessing a marriage dissolve in real time, at Priya, who was taking careful notes with tears in her eyes. Then she stood up. Mr. Grady, she said, her voice clear and strong, your concerns about operational dysfunction are noted. However, I'd like to address them directly. Tyler straightened, sensing opportunity. Of course, Mrs. Whitaker. The board values your perspective on Tuesday morning, Sloane interrupted. I behaved unprofessionally toward a member of our maintenance staff. I allowed personal stress to affect my judgment, and I spoke to another human being in a way that was cruel and unacceptable. Her voice never wavered. That behavior reflected poorly on my leadership and violated the standards of respect that this company should maintain for all employees. The board members looked confused. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected. The dysfunction Mr. Grady documented wasn't caused by conflicts of interest or improper disclosure, Sloane continued. It was caused by my failure to treat my husband with the dignity he deserves, both as a person and as my partner. She walked around the table until she stood beside Marcus. Marcus Cole is the most honest, hardworking, principled man I know. He built a successful company while working maintenance shifts to support our household. He kept his business success private because he wanted our marriage to be based on love, not financial advantage. And when I humiliated him in public, he responded not with revenge, but with an offer to rebuild our relationship on better terms. Sloane turned to face the board directly. So, here's my decision. I'm accepting my husband's offer to transfer ownership because I trust his judgment more than my own pride. And I'm recommending that this board formally censure me for unprofessional conduct because leadership means taking responsibility when you fail to meet the standards you expect from others. Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mrs. Whitaker, the board chairman said carefully, are you certain about this course of action? The ownership transfer would make me accountable to my husband for how I run the company he built, Sloane finished, which is exactly how a marriage should work. She looked at Marcus, her green eyes bright with tears and something that looked like hope. I choose you, she said simply. I choose us, and I choose to be someone worthy of the choice you're making. Marcus felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Marcus picked up the transfer documents and tore them in half. Then the ownership stays where it is, he said, because I don't want a wife who feels obligated to me. I want a partner who chooses me every day because she wants to, not because I've backed her into a corner. The room erupted in confused murmurs, but Marcus only heard Sloane's quiet, "Oh," as she realized what he'd just done. Tyler found his voice first. This is all very touching, but it doesn't address the fundamental governance issues. Actually, it does, Priya said, speaking up for the first time. Mrs. Whitaker has acknowledged and taken responsibility for the conduct in question. Mr. Cole has demonstrated that his ownership decisions are based on legitimate business factors, not personal manipulation. And both parties have affirmed their commitment to maintaining appropriate professional boundaries going forward. She closed her notepad with a decisive snap. From an HR perspective, I see no ongoing compliance concerns. The board chairman looked around the table, reading the room. All in favor of considering this matter resolved? 8 hands went up immediately. 3 board members abstained. 1 voted no. Tyler sat alone at his end of the table, his political smile finally cracking into something that looked like genuine shock. Well then, the chairman said, I believe that concludes our business. Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Cole, thank you for your candor. Mr. Grady, he paused, studying Tyler with new eyes. Perhaps we should schedule some time to discuss your role in manufacturing this crisis. As the board members filed out, Marcus and Sloane found themselves alone in the conference room where their marriage had nearly ended 3 days earlier. So, Sloane said, her voice shaky with relief and something that might have been laughter. That happened. That happened. You were really going to give me the company? I was really going to choose my marriage over my ego. Sloane stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell her perfume and see the small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off her bike as a child. "Can I kiss you?" she asked. Or would that be unprofessional in a business setting? Marcus smiled, really smiled, for the first time in days. "I think we can make an exception. For special circumstances." The kiss was soft, tentative, like people learning each other's shapes again after a long separation. It tasted like coffee and hope and the possibility of being better than they'd been before. When they broke apart, Sloane rested her forehead against his. "So, what happens now?" she asked. "Now you fire Tyler," Marcus said, "because someone who tries to destroy marriages for corporate advancement probably shouldn't be making decisions about company culture." "Already on my list. What else?" "Now we go to dinner at our diner, and we start figuring out how to be married again." "Will you wear the maintenance uniform?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I want everyone to see that I'm proud to be married to the guy who fixes things when they break." Sloane's smile was small, but real. "Including marriages." 3 weeks later, Marcus was replacing a burned out bulb in the lobby when the new Lamborghini caught his attention. Sleek, black, parked right outside the main entrance where everyone entering the building had to see it. He climbed down from his ladder and checked his watch. 7:15 in the morning, early even for him. "Nice car," Eddie said, joining him by the window. "Very nice." "Yours?" Marcus grinned, thinking about it. Through the glass doors, he could see Sloane getting out of her practical sedan, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. She glanced at the Lamborghini, then up at the building, and Marcus caught the exact moment she spotted him through the window. She smiled and held up her coffee cup in a little salute. Marcus waved back and picked up his ladder. Some mornings, he thought, his wife still saw his reflection in expensive cars and remembered to choose who she wanted to be that day. And some mornings, that was enough to keep fixing what was broken, one careful repair at a time. The end.